Hello there, and welcome to the Designated Pundits. I'm Bob, here with my co-host Scott and guest Jackson Phelps. We're here to preview the Seattle Sounders 2025 Major League Soccer season. I think I lost track somewhere. This is our third, fourth, fifth year doing season previews. All 30 teams. We're going to have special guests who are podcasters, radio hosts, announcers for all 30 now Major League Soccer teams. Today is episode number 1 of the 2025 season, and we're previewing the Seattle Sounders. Today, we are joined by special guest host, friend of the show. I guess I get to say that. You've been on around enough. Jackson Phelps. Jackson, let us know a little bit about yourself and where we can find your work.
Gents, it's great to be with you. I am the Sounders pregame, halftime, postgame show host, as well as the host of Sounders Weekly, all on Sports Radio 93.3 KJR FM, and glad to be back with you guys.
Glad to have you, and it's great to see all Apple TV having a lot of away broadcasts for audio. I made a lot of use of that with certain teams around the league, catching like Jess Sharman down with Charlotte, one of my favorite groups to listen to. So, go check out Jackson, check him out. Always great stuff on Twitter. That's one of the best things we do each and every year, have all these guests on. So, it's a pleasure to be here. And we're going to start with something I'm going to ask everyone, and that is, what is your favorite soccer moment from 2024?
Oh, it's got to be the win at LAFC and Jordan Morris's extra time winning goal. I mean, we were down there. We took the whole show down there to Los Angeles, and I remember that morning in LA. I left the hotel downtown, and I was just walking along the street after breakfast, and one of our assistant coaches, Preki, of course, MLS legend Preki, he and I just walk up to a crosswalk together, and we just get chit-chatting. And I'm like, all right, Preki, like revenge, right, and all the things and everything that went into the year against LAFC, because really the moment Jordan's goal was built through the entire last 12 months of losing to LAFC in the playoffs at Lumen Field the previous year, and them knocking us out of Open Cup, knocking us out of Leagues Cup. Just we couldn't beat them. And Preki said, like, there's no element of revenge here. Everybody just has to do their job because we have a plan. And God, they had a plan, and it was a great plan in that game. And we went down, but we got Omer up the field, forced the equalizer in an own goal, and then boom, Jordan in what was it, the 100 and whatever minute. I mean everything in the last 13 months that built to that moment. And for Jordan personally, being a new dad, building to that moment, it was just, I remember we were doing the show from the concourse at what is, that's not Bank of California Stadium anymore. It's like BMO, right? And we were on the concourse. We had LAFC fans like literally 5 feet in front of us. And it was a weird setup for our broadcast. And I just I sat down in the chair behind me, and I just I nearly cried. Like, I teared up. Like, it was such a moment of catharsis. And then when we did win, when it was final whistle, I did cry, because it was just like, we finally did it. Like, 13 months of losing to these bleepers, and we finally did it. And that moment and that goal and that win, it was just, I'll never forget that.
You're such a true believer there, Jackson.
Oh, I'm a fan. I'm a broadcaster, but I'm a broadcaster. I'm a fan. Like, I am Sounders fan who just happens to be behind a mic doing these things.
Yeah, I do remember that game. Before Bob carries on, I just want to say I remember that game as a neutral. It was interesting. I thought LAFC had it. They sort of had Seattle dead to rights a couple of times, and Seattle just kept hanging on. Making the saves that needed to be made. Defense steps up, stay in the game, force the thing. And Jordan Morris's goal, 109th minute, by the way, I just looked that up. I don't keep that stuff in my head. Look that up. 109th minute is that little header, wasn't it? ball across.
Well, it's a I believe a corner that pops back out, and then I forget who it was that then kind of just pops it over to Jordan. But Jordan turns and hits it first time after this turn, and beats Lloris. And like, I'm a Tottenham fan, and him going to LAFC just like hurt my soul. And just to beat Lloris with such conviction and such power on that ball and great placement and the turn, I mean. Like, listen, like if that goal had happened in the 70th minute and that was the equalizer, let's say, instead of the own goal, we'd be talking about that being the moment, right? I mean, like it was a sick goal. It was an amazing goal. So just the fact that was the winner made it all the better.
Just an emotional game, a great game. Sorry, Bob. Go ahead.
No problem. And, we got to now move and talk about last season. Seattle's one of my favorite teams to watch over the course of last season. A lot of guys know I started on a Bet US show working with them. And my co-host, Dan Alexander, who's a small market bettor, we said, Seattle started 1-3-5. They got only 6 points out of their first 9 matches. And we said, let's keep this going because we're going to make a lot of money on this team in the second half of the season. And we made a lot of money on this team in the second half of the season. It just kept coming because they turn it around. And that's, I guess, what Seattle does. Start cold. It doesn't matter. You're making the playoffs. You have Coach Schmetzer, who, when Pete Carroll retired last year, all you had to hear was the best living coach who ever lived in Seattle. Maybe second to, someone who's won a few more championships here in Schmetzer for sure. But, we know Jackson is drinking his own Kool-Aid there, and that's absolutely fine. He's rooting for a great team, and soccer's all about having fun. And I love when the announcers really love the team. I get that. And we could feel it. It's authentic. And, so you have that opportunity to talk up the team as much as you'd like for us here today.
I'll still be objective, Bob. I'll still listen. If there's things to criticize them for, I will. I am able to criticize them for sure. I would say like listen, I'm not an apologist. I am a homer. I'm not an apologist.
That's what we're counting on.
That if carried a lot of weight in that sentence there. Let's recap the 2024 season. 16-9-9 record. They finished 4th in the Western Conference. Again, started at the bottom, and just worked their way through the middle of the season there with some amazing streaks. 51 goals scored, 35 goals allowed, which was the best in Major League Soccer. This is a team who could score a little bit in bunches, but their defense was just making other teams look foolish. They had a plus 16 goal differential, which is good, not elite in Major League Soccer. And they lost 1-0 to LA Galaxy in the conference final. Jackson, recap 2024 for us.
Good, not great, and unfinished is probably the best way. Listen, yes, you're right. The defense was amazing. Led the league. I mean, Jackson Reagan came into his own finalist for Defender of the Year. You put him alongside Nuhu, alongside Yemar Gomez Andrade, and then the right back, Christian played some there. Alex Roldan played some there. I mean, it was an outstanding defense. But listen, I mean, offensively, we were challenged. I'm gonna hold this. I'm not an apologist. Offensively, this team was not good. It was just mid, and they know that going into those playoffs, they need to have really big offensive performances to beat like LAFC and the LA Galaxy, and clearly they got just enough thanks to an own goal to get past LAFC. But we saw against the Galaxy, this was an offensively flawed team. And at the start of the season, we were terrible because Raul Ruidiaz could hit Panenka penalty kicks and he could get 45-yard goals. But Raul Ruidiaz was no longer the same player inside the 18-yard box. That hurt the attack. So when Brian Schmetzer finally made the switch to say, all right, let's put Jordan Morris at the forward, let's have Albert Rusnak at the 10 behind him, let those two work together, that finally got the offense moving. Then we finally started to see things come together. But even then, Pedro de la Vega, our shiny new designated player, young designated player, now full designated player, he was oft injured, and we didn't get to ever see the full Pedro de la Vega. So this offense was lacking a DP, basically. Yes, we saw the rise in a guy like Paul Rothrock, who just came on, from a winger spot and just kept helping put goals in the back of the net. But it was not a top of the line, even close to offense, because we just didn't have the horses. Raul wasn't the same Raul as when we got him in 2018, not even close. So it was an offensively challenged team. And going into the offseason, like we sort of knew, looking at that 1-0 loss to the Galaxy, the mantra was, well, listen, we lost on one big defensive mistake. Well, sure, but we also lost by the fact that we couldn't score a goal. And this was kind of the headline of the offseason. Need offense, need offense, need offense. Craig Weibel said it before the season was over. We need to add multiple offensive pieces in the offseason. We knew it before the 1-0 loss, and we knew it afterwards, and we've known it all the way until this last week when we finally, I think, have done good amounts to solve it. But still, this is a unit that needs to be so much better from a lot of spots. And those numbers that we're seeing, Raul, 8 goals, that's got to be a big number, different number for Jesus Ferreira, who joins the fray.
Yeah, so we had Jordan Morris, 13 goals, 4 assists. I think moving him to striker was kind of a master stroke. I don't think we were getting the best of him from the wing position anymore. Although I have to say, there were times his legs looked dead. There were times he was the fastest guy on the field, and I was sitting back shocked. I'm like, I didn't know this guy still had that in him. So that was very interesting for me to see. But maybe playing in a better position, better suited for him, go put the ball on net from the top position. Albert Rusnak, some of that we know very well on the show, 10 goals, 12 assists. He's back as a DP this year. Rui Diaz, again, he's out, 8 goals. That's all he could contribute. But someone who's responsible for a lot of winning in Seattle for a lot of years, and I'm sure the fans will send him off with a smile on the face. Okay, your time's done, but we'll remember you fondly. You had Paul Rothrock, my surprise player of the year, 5 goals, 2 assists, and Obed Vargas, 1 goal, 4 assists. Those are the major contributors for the Seattle Sounders last year. Scott, any thoughts before we move to the outgoing players?
Yeah. So, excuse me. Yeah, I do have a couple of thoughts. Just on Jordan Morris and Jackson, this is going to lead into some questions about the offense in the next season. Because, look, there's no way to talk about Seattle without saying the offense is your limiting factor. You said it. I'm going to say it. Bob's going to say it. Jordan Morris, 13 goals, 4 assists, kind of leads the way there. Scores in 11 games. You play like 30 over the course of the season. So, that's a third of the game, 2/3 of the games where Jordan Morris is not scoring a goal. That kind of thing sticks out to me. But I pulled some stats earlier, just last season, just thinking about this offense. It's the 1.4 goals scored per match. You're closer in goals per match to New England than you are to 7th place Philadelphia, right? To put some context into where you guys fall in that. You're tied, for 19th spot in the league. Average possession is good. It's 50.6%. You're in 11th. You're safely in a good spot. Accurate passes per match, you're 8th in the league. So that's good. This is a team that can put the ball on the floor and play soccer. Expected goals is 53.1. You're 17th. It's actually not that bad. It's shots on target, big chances, 22nd in the league, 21st in the league. But I'm going to throw you a curveball. Touches in the opposition box, 958. That is 7th in the league. So this team was getting into spots and then breaking down. Something has gone wrong, that you have put yourself in such good spots and gotten absolutely nothing out of it. I guess that's my, to put that context in, as you bring in Jesus Ferreira, and we'll talk about this more later, but as you bring in Jesus Ferreira, how does that build? And then, look, I'm going to ask more questions too about this team's depth in offense, because Jordan Morris has a history. We're hoping he bucked that. Everybody genuinely hopes that he has bucked that history and that it never shows its head again. Jesus Ferreira is coming off a very recent history. So as we look at that context and think about, does this team have the depth to sustain, for a full season?
full seasons, 40 plus games because of CONCACAF and because of the Club World Cup as well.
Mhm.
So like this team needed a bunch of depth. So there's a lot to go through there. So let's just quickly touch on a couple of things. First, you're absolutely right. I mean, we got possession, we got into the box, and then everything just stalled. Part of that was the guys just weren't taking shots. They weren't just pulling up and saying, "Let's go for this." And I think part of that is related to the fact that they're predictable. They were predictable in their movements. They're predictable in the schemes, and we've heard that line get talked about here in the last week since they've been back at the facility at Longacres training, because bringing in Jesus Ferreira and bringing in Paul Arriola, those are two players that add unpredictability. And that's one of the things that this team needed to be able to not only get in the box, but be unpredictable with your movements. I mean, Jesus Ferreira is going to be able to find little gaps inside the 18, something that we didn't have a player who could do that last year. We didn't have a guy who, when everything kind of stalled out onto the wings, and knew who's out there on the left or Alex is out there on the right, and they're kind of going, okay, I can combine with Albert, who's come back, and we can form this little triangle. But how do we move this little triangle in the final third towards the box? And then when we get to the box, how do we actually create, open up opportunities and then take the shots, right? Jesus and Paul, specifically Jesus, are going to allow that unpredictability, that movement in the final third, that movement in the box that will create, I think, a little bit more openings to take shots, and then just the oomph to say, let's shoot it. And I think you're going to see those numbers specifically as you kind of looked up at the rankings, and we kind of just kept dropping. Well, you're good here, but then as it gets closer and closer to an actual goal, the ratings drop, right? I think those will go way up in that regard, and you'll kind of see more even rankings, whether it is, I don't know, is it 5 to 10? Is it 10 to 15? Who knows? But you'll see them align more because I think they added Jesus Ferreira, the piece that really is the reason they stalled so much.
I think that oomph to take the shot that you've mentioned, I think that is important. I can remember a few off the top of my head, just times where that ball was in a promising position and it was like, shoot, this is a goal. And the shot never came, and yes, I don't know if some of that is Jordan Morris feeling, sometimes having the mentality of a winger rather than a striker. I don't know if sometimes it's scheme, but good transition though for us to start talking about how this team is changing with those incoming players and transfers.
Outgoing, we got to talk about Nathan, the defender, Raul Ruiz-Diaz, and Leo Chu, who left in a trade for Jordan Morris. I think that was certainly an upgrade there. Incoming, we talked about Jesus Ferreira. We haven't talked about Paul Arriola, and that is like the Swiss Army knife player. I mean, he could play right back. He could play right wing. He's one of the elite crossers in Major League Soccer. I think someone who could really provide a lot of service in those times. Hey, we're broken down. What can we do? Yeah, put it on Paul's foot and fling it up in the middle. He's someone who's had, U.S. men's national team, even if it's, camp cupcake from years past with Jesus Ferreira. They have, played together quite a bit. I expect there to be a little bit of chemistry there already. A player who I've always liked, never loved, does everything pretty well, although he's never really achieved superstar status. Paul Arriola, really big player. Anything you want to cover here? Players that you're going to miss, players that you added? Let's throw over to
yeah, really quick. I mean, Nathan, his replacement is Josh Atencio. Josh Atencio comes back from the holding midfield. He slides back. He's going to be one of our new center backs. There's rumors about Kim Ki-hee returning to the Sounders as well. He's done very well over in Asia. He's now 35 years old, but he was very well liked when he was with the club years ago. Good for Leo Chu to get a new scene in Dallas. Hopefully he turns it around. But yeah, we've talked about Jesus, what he can do. Paul is the key to this whole thing. Because when over the last week, probably the number one word that us reporters have used is flexibility. The flexibility to basically play a bunch of different ways. The Sounders have run the 4-2-3-1, 4 at the back, 2 holding, Christian and Obed last year. You have, De La Vega, Paul Rothrock, Albert Rusnak, Jordan Morris. That's your 4-2-3-1. Well, we talked about it. They got predictable, right? So how do you get unpredictable? You can change things up with formations and lineups. we got a couple of guys who can be right wing backs in Christian Roldan and Alex Roldan. We don't really have a guy that can be a left wing back. Enter Paul Arriola. Paul Arriola is your left wing back, and he allows this team to play a 3-5-2, and that will fundamentally add flexibility. It will add just unpredictability, and it will make the whole season go in terms of just keeping other head coaches guessing what the heck is Seattle going to do to us today.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that next. We have a depth chart, I guess, a kind of a silly attempt at throwing something together, and there's a lot of things I like here. I was tempted to do like a 4-3-2. I was like running out of players. I was like, I can only have 11. I want 12 on there. Can we sneak someone else in? I was thinking of a 4-2-4, 4-4-2, 4-1-2-1-2, wide. 4-3-3 is kind of what I have up there because that's kind of what they went with last season. Although, as I said, I don't think Jordan Morris really fits as a true left winger on this team. And I do think there's going to be some players up top, but maybe, Rusnak slots out once in a while and Ferreira can, play back a little bit. Let's talk about what we have. We know the back line, Nuhu, Jackson Reagan, EMR, and some type of Alex Roldan, Paul Arriola. There's a lot of players that can play in the right back position. I guess Roldan is number one on our depth chart for now. And behind them, Stefan Fry, a guy who's perennially underappreciated. I love my wife is following him on social media for Wrinkle Wednesday. He has like 2 bulldogs and he posts pictures of them. I know that very much. But he's an elite goaltender in this league. We don't know how the offense is going to be. They might score a lot more than last year. They might score a little more than last year, but we know this is a defense first team. They're going to be organized in the back line. They're going to keep the other team from scoring. So I did want to start there with the spine of the team, the back line.
Yeah, no, and that you nailed it right there with that back line. I mean, Paul, you could put his name under the left. You could put his name under Obed. You could put his name under Christian. Paul is you mentioned it. I think it was a perfect word for it. The Swiss Army knife, right? And then you have Yamar, you have Jackson, you have Nuhu, and that threesome, whether it's those 3 in a 4 or those 3 playing a 3 in a 3-5-2. I mean, it's so you kind of built the 4-3-3 there. I couldn't tell you how to build a Sounders depth chart. I mean, it is just guessing right now. Do you build a 4-2-3-1? Do you build a 3-5-2? Do you build something completely different? A few years ago, Brian Schmetzer came out with our house formation, and the 3-4-1 or 3-4-2-1 or something like that. It was just, it's kind of like, what the heck are they going to play? And it's going to change. It could change on a game-to-game basis, depending if you're home, away, what players you have available. Are somebody on international duty? Is somebody injured? It's just going to change so much with that flexibility, which will be great, for competitive advantages against other head coaches. Listen, I have to prepare pregame shows. And as somebody who's preparing pregame shows, trying to piece together, like, okay, wait, what are we going to be talking about? What are the lineups? Because I spend a good couple hours on every game day just kind of taking the morning, and I'll kind of craft out, all right, it's 4-2-3-1. We know how this is going to work. It's the predictability for me. If I'm sitting at home and I could say, yes, it's obvious what the starting lineup is going to be, you damn well know the other head coach is going to do it. I have no idea going into the first game. Like the CONCACAF game that we're playing on February 19th, I have no damn idea what kind of a lineup we're going to play. And that kind of unpredictability is great. And it's impossible for people like us to build a depth chart, to prep for pregame shows. It's sort of like, for me, it's, as a fan, I love it. And as a broadcaster, I hate it. So one of the big moves last year that led to a lot of success, and Sounder fans will probably say, like, listen, it's Albert and Jordan's connection. Sure, it is, but it's also the partnership of Christian and Obed. So Christian slid back into the holding midfielder role and kind of became the Ozzy Alonso that we once had. And we really saw, like, okay, Christian is our 6. That partnership, like, Obed could get up the field and Christian would stay. So what that allowed the Sounders to do is say, all right, Christian is now kind of the defensive guy. And Joao Paulo, his quality decreased a little bit. JP's now kind of a depth piece. He was brought back. It's great. He's on a 1-year deal. JP will be plug in when other guys aren't available, but like JP's depth piece. Christian Roldan is the guy who's going to be hanging back. He's our full defensive midfielder, Ozzy Alonso type of role. Obed will get up the field. And that ability, you talk about the leadership for Christian to be able to say, like, listen, I am the guy who's going to stick a foot in, and I am going to get up in the face of, whatever their number 10 is. And I'm going to be the one who's, one-on-one with that person, making sure they don't, get Jackson or Yamar in trouble or in a dangerous spot. So the leadership role for Christian has just grown because now he's saying, I'm in the middle of the park, which is my preferred spot. I have the ability to stay or go depending on what Obed does. And Obed Vargas, my God, I mean, he's just absolutely lit onto the scene. But Christian's leadership role and the defensive abilities that he has now shown over this last 8-10 months, that was a big reason for the Sounders going on a second half run. And you aren't going to see the assists, you aren't going to see the goals, you aren't going to see the numbers, but he's doing the dirty work on a game by game basis, and he's as important as he's ever been to the Sounders.
You say getting up in other players' faces, maybe like up in their belly button, that region.
I just want to point something out. Oh, that was harsh. I just want to point something out about Christian Roldan. We're talking about his late career, whatever.
He's a lot younger than I thought he was.
He's still 29.
Yeah.
He's not even 30 yet. I guess
he's not that small, so I'll
guess 30 sometime in June, whatever. So he's still got some good years left in the tank, probably. I do think that for a player like Christian Roldan, though, it's that footballing brain, as they would say. That's kind of the ability to transition into different roles, contribute in different ways, be a leader in different ways on the field. Some leaders are leaders by scoring goals. Some leaders are leaders by making tackles, whatever. Some leaders are leaders by dictating the game in different ways. To me, I don't know, is that what Christian is? He's a guy who dictates the game, with to his teammates, to other teams?
Yeah, that's a good, interesting phrase. I wouldn't say he dictates the game. I would say he leads by example. Very much just sort of like, if a game calls for toughness and if a game calls for, playing a little bit grittier, he will lead by example in that context. If a game calls for it's more open and he needs to get up, he will be able to say, if it's him there and Alex off to his right playing, right back, right wing back, let's go, let's get up. It's that leadership, because Stefan Fry is the captain, sure, and Stefan Fry leads the back line, great. But Christian Roldan, I think, is the voice for a lot of that midfield. And as good as Albert Rusnak was statistically last year, deserving of his new DP, or I guess redone DP contract, Christian Roldan is sort of the engine room. And this team may go as Christian Roldan's leadership goes.
Sorry, I was going to transition. I was going to say, that's great. Awesome. I was going to transition then into Rusnak, into that attacking mid spot. Bob, is that where you're going?
Sure.
And look, if you've got questions about Albert or about Christian, we can go. But I just guess transitioning up the field, obviously you mentioned Albert and Jordan Morris had a connection. Is that something you see kicking off? Do you think, Albert's the guy? Do you see new roles popping in there?
I do see new roles, because Jesus Ferreira will, I think, inevitably change what these guys. I mean, yes, there still will be connections where Rusnak will see Jordan Morris running in behind center backs and he'll see an opportunity to slip a ball in behind. That'll inevitably happen a couple times this year for sure. But if they play a 3-5-2 and you work with a three in the middle of, say, Albert, Pedro, and let's just say Obed, right? And that'll change. Then there's going to be two up top in Jordan and Jesus. And Jesus maybe, I think you said it earlier, drift a little bit behind Jordan. So suddenly you have different outlets. So does Albert look as much, all right, I'm looking from the middle of the field all the way to behind the back line for Jordan to make that run? Or do I look for an intermediate pass to now Jesus who's there? So I think the roles do change a little bit. For Jordan, it's probably a little bit of the same, but now he'll just have help under him to be able to facilitate more balls in, pull defenders, and give more, Jordan more one-on-ones with a single center back. Because if you can imagine it, let's say that Pedro de la Vega is on the left and he gets out wide with a ball and he then cuts in on his right foot. and he's looking to put a ball into the box. Well, last year we just had Jordan. So, Albert's running behind him, but it's just Jordan. And, whether it's Albert running off the right, it's just Jordan. Now, whether it's Albert on the right, Pedro on the left, that ball coming in, it's not just Jordan. It's Jordan who has one center back pulled towards goal, and maybe there's an opportunity to put a ball in. But it's also Jesus Ferreira right behind Jordan who's finding a hole. And suddenly you have Jordan and Jesus both one-on-one with center backs, theoretically. You're stretching that back line. You're stretching those center backs. You're creating one-on-ones. And I don't see a center back who's going to keep up with either of those guys in a foot race.
Absolutely. I'm looking at this now and I'm kind of seeing like a 4-2-2-2-2 or a 4-2-2-1, something like that. Maybe, De La Vega and Rusnak is like dual number 10s with, a lot of freedom on the field there. Yep. Loving that. You talked about leadership on the field with Rusnak, with Roldan, with Morris. You certainly have guys who've been around, Areola adding to that. Pedro De La Vega, let's crack this nut here. Injured at the beginning of the season, never really got off to a clean start. However, he was back in July. I would hope he was not playing anywhere near 100%. I mean, just looking at the minutes served, you could tell that was not the case. But he did put in 944 minutes, which is a nice clip of play, almost 10 and a half full games. 1 goal, 1 assist. Obviously, that's disappointing. Do we expect there to be something more this year because of injury and, availability? Because last year was certainly a disappointment. And just when he started getting a stretch of games, okay, yeah, let's see what he's got. It just wasn't put together for him last year.
You nailed it. You nailed it. I mean, Pedro's year last year was just so frustrating. He was never fully fit, I don't think. And he never got to 100%. And obviously that impacted those numbers in terms of goals and assists. And also just like the connection, he kept, having to go off onto the rehab, pitch, and you have to just never getting to build that cohesion with teammates. And yes, I think like 10 and a half games, it's a lot of games, and you had a lot of time, but it was spread over a lot of different periods. And, he just did the re-injuries and this and that and this and that. He never, it kind of felt like, let me see if I can put this way. A puzzle was there for Brian Schmetzer, and the pieces of building this attack, he saw kind of the way that the puzzle was shaped. And Pedro's puzzle piece, Brian knew that the puzzle piece went here, but the puzzle piece just never fit. And it was just, whether it was too big or too small or whatever, it never fit. And because Pedro just was never fit. So to put it simply, Pedro was never just the guy that we thought he was going to be. So yeah, the expectations are big for him to finally see the DP that we signed that we think is going to be, the next, great. It means that he's wearing our number 10. That comes with a lot of pressure. And he is supposed to be a great offensive weapon. Well, all right, now that you've had a full offseason, now that you're fit, now that you're, ingrained with the team, you're going to have a full normal preseason. Let's see that Pedro De La Vega. And not to mention, he has another weapon in Jesus Ferreira up with him. He's going to have help to, be able to assist, to score off of. And like, there's no world where where Pedro De La Vega isn't better than he was last year. The question is how much better. This team may go as Pedro De La Vega goes.
We have some storylines to watch in 2025. These are posed as questions, although they're kind of only going to be answered, I guess, on the field. First one is Seattle going to use 1 or 2 at the top of an attack? I guess you can ask 1, 2, or 3. I guess I don't really count wingers. I mean, how many center forwards is his team going to line up with? 1 or 2? If you had to take a guess right now, you'd say 2?
I'd say yes. to both, because some games they'll play with 1, and some games they're going to play with 2, and it'll just depend on availability, who they're playing. If they're playing on the road, do we go a 5 and then a 2 up top to be able to counter on them? At home, do we play with 1? Is it Ferreira and then Morris on the wing? It's just going to change so much. I think that the answer is yes to both.
This is not a question for me, but it's a question from Twitter. A lot of people were throwing this out there when we found out Jordan Morris was going to be on a DP tag. Will Jordan Morris produce enough to justify a DP tag? I said 13 goals, however many is what he had, 9 assists, something like that 13 and 4. Yes, for me. And it's not my money, so I don't care how they spend it. What is your thought here?
Yeah, it was interesting because it kind of came as a shock to a lot of people that, like, oh, he had it written into his contract where if he hit certain goal contributions, it was a DP. So I think that Jordan has numbers for himself for sure because he thinks he's worthy of that. Does he hit the same numbers this year with Jesus Ferreira coming into the fold? Maybe he does. Also, this team should score more goals. But if Pedro de la Vega is going to get a few goals, I shouldn't say he hopefully get him more than a few goals. If Jesus Ferreira is going to get more goals than Raul Ruidiaz got last year, and that's 8 more than 8, then can Jordan hit 13 again? It's going to be interesting to see at the end of the year where I don't think it's a shoe-in to say like Jordan's going to get another 13. I think 10 seems to be about the right number. 12. But and you look at the goals across all competitions, Jordan's number was very high last year, and sort of like, can he hit that number? Well, with everybody else as a part of the attack, the versatility, the different ways of playing, is he going to hit that number? I think it's probably about 50-50 at that 13 goal. I mean, that's probably where you set, 12 and a half is probably where you set the over under right now.
I think that's probably pretty fair. Jordan's streak seems to be that he doesn't score. He's not an every game scorer. That doesn't seem to be his thing, but he pops up with goals here and there, especially can score important goals, as we've seen. And then just every now and then he'll ring you for 5. You know what I mean? I do have a follow-up question on this DP question. Like, you've got Morris, who had it written into his contract. Rusnak was sort of out of contract and then brought back on the DP deal. And then Pedro de la Vega is your returning DP. Looking at those 3, is there a feeling that you're like, yes, I'm happy with those 3 as my DPs? Or are you looking at it like, I think that DP spot and that money could maybe be used better elsewhere?
I think in a perfect world, you'd have Jordan be a TAM player, a high TAM player, like maximum TAM. And then you'd have Portland or Seattle fans are going to kill me for this, Jonathan Rodriguez, right? Like that type of a player, right? You'd have a big, bodied guy who you can just lob a 40-yard ball into from Jackson Reagan, who bodies it down, turns, scores, right? It's not getting in behind. It's just a dude. And getting a DP who can score 15, just, looking at his foot, that sure would be better. The reality of the situation is when Jordan negotiated this deal, as Craig Weibel and Jordan have said, Jordan said, I believe I'm a DP. And Craig said, prove it. And thus it was written in. So because it was written in, we didn't have this ability to go get a player, like a different forward. So we make it work with, all right, well, Jordan's a DP. We got to get Jesus Ferreira, but we can't have Jesus Ferreira as a fourth DP. So we got to get him on TAM. So that whole guy would be negotiated. So it's sort of like, yeah, in a perfect world, all of these things we'd have, we'd have Jesus and we've had Jordan as a TAM and we'd have the cash to still be able to, make it all happen with a high price, big 15-20 goal score forward and make it all work together. But there's such a thing as salary caps, right? And there's such a thing as limited DP spots. And we don't have 4, we only have 3. So that's the constraints for Craig Weibel, that he had to play with just the limitations. So he maxed out everything he could. He got Jesus on the deal he did, which, by the way, is also like Jordan's, where if Jesus hits performance metrics and goal contributions, he will also become a DP just like Jordan. So it's the limitations of what Craig had to play with in terms of the MLS roster regulations.
You heard it here on the Designated Pundits. Cabecita is Jackson Felt's favorite Major League Soccer player. That's what I heard in the 1 year there.
Yeah, he's
to get him on the team.
Watching Portland games with envy.
Listen, man, I remember seeing Jonathan Rodriguez, and Jonathan Rodriguez is such a good player. It's one of those things where, like, I hate a lot of Portland Timbers. But like, I could look at Diego Valeri and just give it up. Like, and I look at John Rodriguez and I'm like, damn, you're a good player.
I want to rephrase this last question. It's not, does Pedro de la Vega have a bounce back here? It's more important than that. Is he inevitable? is this someone who he's going to be healthy and he is going to be someone to put a star next to on your roster, an asterisk, and say he's going to be a star in this league this year? Is that inevitable this season?
No, I don't think it's inevitable. Absolutely not. We still need to see it. I mean, like we were told, like he's healthy and he's ready, and he wasn't, and we didn't see it. So we just haven't seen the full Pedro de la Vega experience yet. And it's not an automatic that he's going to be. Listen, we all hope he's going to be exactly what we all expect. But the reality is, like, yeah, he's coming off of some injuries, and does he still have it all together is a big question. I mentioned it. This team goes as Pedro goes, and so, like, is he inevitable? No, not even. But I mean, 10 games into the season, you could ask me that. And if Pedro has, I don't know, 5-5, 10 games into the season, and we finally see, oh, this is the guy we got, 14 months ago, then it'll be that, yes, yeah. At that point, we will see. All right, he is who we thought he was. He is inevitable. But right now, he's just still such an unknown.
I like that. I like the way that you've put that. I hope that we haven't seen the Pedro de la Vega experience. Sometimes there's always the fear that, like, you know what, this is it. This is the guy. But young player, he's 23, I think. First year in the league, we have seen so many examples of guys who struggle to adapt to this league. We have seen so many examples of young players who struggle to adapt to this league. New place to live, right? New culture, new teammates, lots of new. And that kind of stuff gives me hope for Pedro de la Vega. We have seen players in their second year, after struggling for the first year, struggling to build chemistry with their teammates, struggling to get up to speed with what the league is and the style of play and all of that. Second year comes around and they're much more settled. They're much more adapted. That's kind of what I would hope to see out of Pedro de la Vega, and whatever he then turns out to be, right? I think when you have Jesus Ferreira on the field, who is a guy who can drop deeper and help create, when you have Albert Rusnak, who is a guy who can help create, there is a lot more room for Pedro de la Vega to express exactly who he is and remove some of that pressure to be things that the team didn't have going for them last season. That's just kind of how I see it, as just removing some of that pressure, let him be who he is and see what that really is.
Absolutely love that. Let's finish up with some predictions here. I want to first start, what is the team's best possible outcome? What's the worst possible outcome? And what's the most realistic season outcome? We'll go Jackson actually last on this, because I have a feeling I know what he's going to say.
Yeah.
Best possible outcome is got to be looking towards an MLS Cup.
Yeah, if the best possible outcome is not the MLS Cup, I don't know what you're saying.
Worst possible outcome, I think if there's injuries on the back line and the offense isn't a top 5 offense and the back line isn't at the top 5 back line, this team is not in 4th place again. I think that they're in 6th, 7th. They're struggling a decision day to make the playoffs. And I think the most likely outcome is a top 4 to 5 spot. The West has some heavyweights. They have some stinkers, but they have a lot of teams who made themselves a lot better. And it's going to be very interesting to see where they last. And because this is our first preview, I can't get too high on it with the most likely, most realistic outcomes. Scott, you want to throw one out there?
I agree. I think the worst kind of bad luck season for them. Look, we've seen Seattle have these bad luck seasons. That's kind of actually their MO, is to have a huge period of bad luck and then get hot and run it into the playoffs. Look, I think bad luck seasons put them, yes, somewhere near the bottom of the playoff, qualifications. I think realistically, this is not your, supporter shield team. It's a top 3rd, 4th kind of spot again. But it's a team who, once again, is hot going into the playoffs. That, I think realistically, that's what it is. It's a team who is going to have kind of that home advantage and go into the playoffs hot.
They show every year that they can afford to start every season slow, and it's not going to matter with the end of season result.
And don't forget all the extra competitions that they are going to be involved in this year too. That is going to throw wrenches into the start of the season.
Jackson, you give it a shot.
I pretty much agree completely. The best possible outcome is MLS Cup winners, because last year, you look at it, it was the offense that let them down. If they're leading, or if they are able to get past the LA Galaxy in that West final, we beat New York and we're MLS Cup winners, and we have another star above our crest. We are that close. And it was 12 minutes before the final whistle that Alex Roldan makes that mistake, and we don't cover well, and boom, it's a goal, and we lose 1-0. We're 12 minutes. And I think that if that game goes to extra time, they're playing with a lot more pressure behind them, and we have a good shot to even beat the Galaxy if that game goes 0-0 to the next. So we are that close to a star above the crest.
12 minutes from the most boring Major League Soccer Cup final in the history of the league. Yes, we almost had that.
But it doesn't matter how boring it is. We remember 2016. That still gave us a star. So listen, we were that close, and we got way better offensively. We got way more unpredictable. We have a lot more flexibility with Paul Arriola. So all of that said, we fixed what we were missing to get to an MLS Cup. That's the best possible. Worst, you're right. Injuries, hit, bad luck. We're looking at 6, 7, 8 seed. I still think worst case scenario, we're in the playoffs. I don't think there's a world where the Sounders miss the playoffs this year. And if they don't, you can play this clip to me next year and you can embarrass the hell out of me. But I just don't think there's any universe where that doesn't happen. Realistic, I am also right on with you guys. It's a top 3. Also, I would say, if the LA Galaxy sell Gabriel Peck, or if LAFC sell Mateusz Bagush, then those are 2 very different squads. That could open a top 2 seed in the Western Conference. And if bad luck hits them, if injuries hit them, whatever. But the Sounders, Obed might be sold. Who knows? I would be surprised if those 2 teams didn't make a move because of the young players that are having such success down there in Los Angeles. So that could open the Sounders to a top 2 seed. Realistically, you're looking at about the 3 seed, I think. And realistically, I think you're looking at a Western Conference final appearance. I said this out at training yesterday. I said, if you were to just say you have to put $100 down right now on give me the final game for 2024. Tell me for 2025, excuse me. Tell me the final result, where it'll be, what will happen. You have to put 100 right now. I say it's going to be a 2-1 loss at LAFC. The opposite result that we beat them last year, just because, listen, it's LA, and Seattle, and it looks to me like it'll continue to be LA, Seattle.
You heard it here.
Lot to cover here, and last thing we have to do is see it all played out. I know we're a little early, January 16th, but we're going in order of teams that we think are kind of a finished product. Seattle still has a few roster changes maybe to make, but we think that this is a really good chance to show and showcase one of the teams that has certainly assembled a formidable roster even early in the preseason. And camp is right around the corner. So absolutely. Thank you, Jackson Feltz, for joining us here on the show. I think my goal for 2025 is not to wait until next January to talk to you next. We got to have you on again sometime real soon. Good luck with all your work. Let us know one more time where we can find your work.
At Jackson on Radio is my Twitter, and I don't do much Instagram, but at Jackson on Radio is my handle for things. That iHeartRadio app, just search Sounders on there. I do Sounders Weekly, the Sounders pregame, halftime, postgame shows, all for KJR Radio out here in Seattle.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for checking in. Have a wonderful week, and make sure you check out the other 29 videos we're going to have for each and every Major League Soccer team. Have a great night, guys. Goodbye.